This, to me, is the worst of Donald Trump that gets at the conspiracy theories, the idea that the 2020 election was stolen when clearly it wasn't. These job numbers weren't flubbed. This is a reaction to Donald Trump's tariffs.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've stumbled across this video of a Table for Five CNN show featured on Abby Phillip's show. They discussed the firing of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics after she released bad jobs numbers, and watch as a MAGA speaker tries to defend the decision while the rest of the panel absolutely dismantles the argument, calling it out as banana republic behavior and an attack on truth itself. It gets heated when they debate whether we can even trust government data anymore. So make sure you watch until the end, and please comment down where you're watching the video from. Thanks for everyone who's commenting under every video. I really appreciate it. All right, now let's get into the video.
Good morning, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Is it the best of times or the worst of times? Once again, another American sector becomes a political Rorschach test. First, the good. The economy has largely defied gravity despite the uncertainty of Donald Trump's tariffs. The nation's GDP grew sharply in the second quarter, and people are shopping. Consumer spending, which powers 70% of the economy, is also up. Combine this with steady inflation, a stronger stock market, and tariff revenue in the billions, according to the White House. Now, here's the bad news. The unemployment rate is rising. Hiring is slowing. July's jobs report was the worst since the pandemic. Prices are up. Investment in this is down. And once again, confusion and chaos reign over who gets a tariff and who gets a delay and who gets a break. Oh, and Trump just fired the messenger in charge of the jobs reports. Why? Because he didn't like the results.
We're doing so well. I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. And there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her. Right. And you know what? I did the right thing.
So, do you feel liberated yet? Well, it depends on who you ask. This firing of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is, I think, one of the more stunning things that Trump has done, not because people in Washington will be stunned, but because of the ripple effects that it will have for the people who rely on it around the globe and on Wall Street, people who make business decisions here in this country.
Yeah, I think that there's going to inevitably have to be a private sector alternative that emerges. Most of these statistics can be pulled after the fact. Even if the government tries to flub the numbers or fudge them, there is a way that we're going to be able to get that data. But keep in mind, he's toyed with the idea of firing Jerome Powell on a number of occasions. That's something that's much more difficult for him to do. There are checks in place. His lawyers, I bet, have advised him against doing so. This is something that's technically within his purview to do. But I think it raises concerns naturally if you're going to put somebody in place who's going to be a bit more favorable to you. Are they going to inflate the numbers as we see them? But to your opening, we're in a choose your own adventure economy. There's something good. There's plenty of good things you could point to, and there's plenty of bad things you could point to. What you don't need right now is this sort of just uncertainty when you're giving out basics around jobs numbers.
I mean, just 2 days ago, Howard Lutnick was saying, GDP surged to 3% and the Trump economy has officially arrived. Biden's first quarter is behind us and growth is already accelerating. So the only thing that's really changed is Trump's mood.
Yeah.
Today.
I mean, look, if I were a decision desk on the economy, I'd say it's too early to call. We don't know exactly where this Trump economy is necessarily going, though I do have to ask the question of whether or not the suit that Donald Trump wore on Friday is from the Banana Republic. Because when you fire a lifelong bureaucrat whose mere job is to count the numbers, count the number of jobs. This is not a partisan position. This, to me, is the worst of Donald Trump that gets at the conspiracy theories, the idea that the 2020 election was stolen when clearly it wasn't. These job numbers weren't flubbed. This is a reaction to Donald Trump's tariffs that, at least in the near term, at least the job market did not necessarily like.
I think that's absolutely right. And what scares me here is this notion of, if you don't give me jobs numbers I like, I will fire you. What will the next person do, right? Every Trump firing is that if you don't give me what I like. So does he live in a world where he doesn't actually know what's going on? Because the people who might say, hey, something bad is happening, wouldn't say it to him because they would risk losing their job?
Look, it is well within his purview to make this decision to fire the jobs person. It's well within purview to do it. And look, they had to make adjustments to the jobs numbers for the prior months. There were some adjustments that had to be made about a year ago in August. So when you look at it over time, it's within his purview to do it. If he doesn't have confidence in the person, he has a right to fire them.
In other words,
elections have consequences.
So in other words, if he doesn't like the results that the person is producing, he can fire them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The jobs report comes out, it's not great, and the immediate response from the president is, I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. So you know what I did? I fired her. And you know what? I did the right thing. You fired the person who counts the numbers because you didn't like what they counted. Do you understand what that does? That's not reforming government. That's not draining anything. That's literally just shooting the messenger because the message made you uncomfortable. And Harry absolutely nailed it when he said, when you fire a lifelong bureaucrat whose mere job is to count the numbers, this is not a partisan position. This, to me, is the worst. Yes, because this isn't about left or right. This is about whether we live in a reality-based system or not. The Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't make the economy good or bad. They just report what's happening. They're literally accountants. It's like firing your doctor because you don't like your test results. The disease doesn't go away just because you fired the person who diagnosed it. And here's what terrifies me. Torre said it perfectly. What scares me here is this notion of, if you don't give me jobs numbers I like, I will fire you. What will the next person do? Exactly. What happens now? The next person knows their job depends on making the numbers look good. So do they fudge them? Do they delay bad reports? Do they just lie? Because that's not a hypothetical. We've seen this playbook before in other countries. When leaders fire statisticians for reporting bad economic data, those economies don't magically get better. They just lose the ability to know what's actually happening. You can't fix problems you refuse to acknowledge exist. And the excuse that revisions happen is such a red herring. Yes, data gets revised. That's how statistics work. You get preliminary numbers, then you get more complete data later. That's not corruption. That's just how counting hundreds of millions of data points works in real time.
There was an adjustment in the results. The results weren't right.
That doesn't mean that the director was wrong.
This also isn't going to give him the solution he wants, because the reality is, and we said this all leading up to the election, you can give people whatever stats you want about the economy. How they feel is going to dictate their feelings. Heading into the midterms, if they people they know are struggling to find jobs, if they've been laid off, if unemployment is up, they're going to know that regardless of what the Bureau of Labor Statistics
That's true.
says.
It also is true that revisions happen. They happen under every president. They happened when he was president the first time. They happened under Biden. So the idea that revisions are inherently a problem is nonsensical. That doesn't.
Well, I don't know that it's nonsensical. It's, again,
it is. I mean,
within the
it
province
is
of the president. Elections
he's
have
acting as if
consequences.
this is
If he
something
wants to change somebody
new.
out, it's well within
he's
his
acting
province
as if
to do
this is
so.
something new when it's really not. There are revisions. Actually, almost every month. It's just that they're not always all large.
And the argument this is going to have some tremendous ripple effect on the economy long term. I mean, going back to your point, that it's really not. And we're not going to be talking about this a week from now.
We're not going to be able to trust the government to tell us the truth. That is a very important thing, especially within a global economic context. How do we know that the next person will tell us the truth? Because his job is on the line or her job is on the line.
That is a good question. I mean, how will we know?
I mean, look, this person is not a protected job. We have elections have consequences.
But to answer his question,
we can change out folks in leadership positions because the president wants to.
I know, but Jim, to answer Toure's question, how does Trump explain to people that they should trust these numbers when he has literally explicitly fired someone because he did not like the numbers that they produced?
Or he didn't believe in the numbers, or the numbers had to be adjusted.
Going forward, when he puts somebody in that position, the whole world is going to assume, well, that person has that job because that person's going to produce numbers that Donald Trump likes.
Look, that's why we have congressional oversight. Right? That's why Congress exists, to have congressional oversight. And it's up to Congress then to hold these agencies accountable. We have checks and balances in this country. The president isn't the only check and is not the only balance.
It's just interesting that Trump is sort of devoid of agency in this situation, as if he doesn't have the power to exert some kind of modicum of self-control in this moment.
Donald Trump can do a lot of things as president. The presidency is vested in enormous powers. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And in this particular case, I am somebody who studies stats. And, I give Donald Trump, I think, a very fair shake. I give all sides, I think, a pretty fair shake. But it is reliant on the numbers being reliable. And when you make moves like this, you see a little bit of doubt that the numbers going forward with whomever is put in charge of the BLS, all of a sudden, at least in terms of the numbers, that they are not nearly what they should be.
And that's
So now we're at this absolutely wild moment where Abby asks the perfect question. How does he explain to people that they should trust these numbers when he has literally explicitly fired someone because he did not like the numbers that they produced? And the answer is he can't. There is no way to square that circle. You cannot fire someone for reporting numbers you don't like and then expect anyone to trust the numbers going forward. That's not how credibility works. And I love how some people try to defend this with like, well, he has the authority to do it. It's within his purview. Okay? Harry said it best. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Thank you. I can eat ice cream for every meal. I have the authority to do that. Doesn't mean it's a good idea. Having the power to do something and it being the right thing to do are completely different concepts. And this whole idea that Congress will provide oversight, are we serious right now? Congressional oversight works when Congress is willing to provide oversight. We've spent years watching Congress abdicate its responsibility to check executive power when it's politically inconvenient for them to do so. Plus, congressional oversight is reactive. By the time Congress investigates, the damage is done. The credibility is already shot. Markets don't wait for congressional hearings to decide whether to trust economic data. And look at the situation we're creating. Businesses make decisions based on these numbers. The Federal Reserve makes interest rate decisions based on these numbers. Other countries make trade decisions based on these numbers. When you politicize the data itself, you're not just playing political games. You're undermining the entire foundation of how modern economies function. Because here's the thing, economic data isn't just about politics. It's about reality. Companies need to know whether to hire or lay off workers. The Fed needs to know whether to raise or lower interest rates. Investors need to know where to put their money. When you make the data untrustworthy, you make all of those decisions harder and more risky. And the cost of that isn't abstract. It's real people's jobs, real people's retirement accounts, real people's ability to get loans and start businesses. When economic data becomes unreliable, the entire economy becomes less efficient, and that hurts everyone.
Very key point, because if you put somebody in who's just a diehard Trump loyalist and suddenly you start seeing off the charts numbers that just don't reflect the reality of the economy, Americans are not going to believe it. But we do live in such a polarized environment right now that about half the country is going to be like, yeah, I don't trust a Biden appointee, put in a Trump person. And the other half is going to be like, this is unprecedented. You're firing a bureaucrat who's not a partisan. So I think either way you're going to have a lack of trust, but I do think there's a way that the numbers should.
But your other point is trust the bureaucracy? Are we going to sit around this table and say that people in this country trust career bureaucrats at this point? I don't think that's the case. We had to change election for that
however
reason.
many years, okay? Everybody gets the jobs numbers on the first Friday of the month, and they digest them. But the more important thing about jobs numbers, I mean, yes, everybody understands the economy based on their own personal economy, what's happening in their families and their communities. But government entities, businesses make decisions based on these official numbers. They matter because they are tied to something. So when they go away, I mean, we already have private sector numbers. ADP produces numbers, but the reason we have government numbers is because we have government entities that make decisions based on those numbers. When that goes away, what do we have?
And are we going to sit around this table and say that government always gets it right?
Government
the bureaucrats always get it right?
That
we trust everything the bureaucracy.
Well, let me go back to what Harry Enten said.
There's no way the American people
Let me go back
believe
to what Harry Enten said at the beginning. What makes the United States different from the Banana Republic or the Soviet Union or whatever it is that actually, that over many decades we've created a system in which people believe, not just us as Americans, but around the world, that American statistics and numbers and facts are generally reliable. And when that goes away, that's the part that I think that is
uncharted territory. But you're presupposing it's going to go away just because we change out the person.
I'm just asking. I mean, I'm asking the question. What's the criteria by which Donald Trump's going to pick that new person in that slot?
I think the ongoing attack on truth that we see from Trump will have a global impact of we cannot trust the United States. We don't know what they're saying is true.
And now we get to the core of why this matters so much. Alyssa makes this crucial point. If you put somebody in who's just a diehard loyalist, and suddenly you start seeing off-the-charts numbers that just don't reflect the reality of the economy, Americans are not going to believe it. But here's what's even scarier than that. It's not just that Americans won't believe it. It's that we'll split into two realities. Half the country will believe the official numbers because they trust the administration, and half will reject them because they don't. And then we're not even arguing about the same facts anymore. We've already seen this happen with so many things. We can't even agree on whether something happened or not because we live in different information ecosystems. And now we're doing it with the economy, with the most fundamental statistics that we use to understand how our country is functioning. And Abby absolutely hits the nail on the head at the end. What makes the United States different from the Banana Republic or the Soviet Union is that over many decades, we've created a system in which people believe that American statistics and numbers and facts are generally reliable. Yes, this is everything. The reason the American economy became the most powerful in the world isn't just because we have resources or innovation. It's because we built institutions that people could trust. When you invest in America, you know the numbers you're seeing are real. When you make a business deal, you know the economic data is legitimate. That trust took generations to build, and it can be destroyed in a matter of months. Once you politicize the data, once you make people doubt whether the numbers are real or just political propaganda, you can't just flip a switch and get that trust back. Other countries are watching this. China would love for people to stop trusting American economic data. Russia would be thrilled if American statistics became as politicized and unreliable as their own, because that levels the playing field in the worst possible way. And for what? Because one jobs report wasn't good? The economy is complex. There are going to be good months and bad months. There are going to be reports you like and reports you don't like. That's not a bug. That's a feature. That's how you know the data is real. When every report is positive, when every statistic shows everything is perfect, that's when you know someone's cooking the books. Real data is messy. It goes up and down. It reflects reality, not wishful thinking. So now we're stuck in this nightmare scenario where we can't trust the numbers, which means we can't have honest conversations about the economy, which means we can't make good policy decisions, which means the economy actually gets worse. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of dysfunction. So what do you think of this? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.